to back up, because we both have the context, because I've read the book and you wrote the book and lived it. So the premise of Will's book is that he, and I will say like an idiot, I say that lovingly, but like an
I'll say
idiot,
that too.
decided for his very first triathlon he was going to do an Ironman. And many people along the way also said he was an idiot, but he continued anyway. And the book is basically a recounting of the trials and tribulations leading up to the race and the race itself. Um,
Right. Now,
so
I do want to tell you something. I got to tell you a side story here because I agree I'm an idiot, but now you might feel a little bad for me because originally the way this book came in is that this publisher and I were discussing other topics, which it didn't
mhm,
work out, separate story. But then the Ironman came up, and I'm based out here in Hawaii.
right.
And at this time in 2017, it was leading up to the 40th anniversary in 2018.
Hmm.
And, triathlon participation has been growing like a weed.
Yep.
So this was kind of like a good time we thought to maybe do something on it. And so my publisher was really like, hey, why don't we work on sort of a historical account, looking at where Ironman started
Hmm.
and seeing
Hmm.
to where it is now. And that could be an interesting project. And as you know, like the book has a lot of those components in it,
Right.
kind of retracing the steps and the history of it. So that was the initial goal. And when I was talking to the publisher, this was like July of 2017, firming all this up, my plan was like, okay, like I'm an immersive journalist. Like I want to do an Ironman or at least like take part or try or whatever, get involved. So I'm thinking it's July 2017. Like I'll train this winter. I was looking up the Ironman schedule for next summer. I'm like, okay, maybe next July I'll do one or next fall. The publishing process is so long. We'll turn the book in like, right around the 40th anniversary. We could still get it out in time. I could train. So all in my mind, I'm having this timeline going. Um, and this is just me being naive because this is my first book.
Right.
So then we get to signing on the dotted line, and I'm like, I reveal this timeline to them at like the final meeting, and they're like, "Great, we love your outline, we love what you're gonna do. The only thing we need to change is that like you don't have that much time. You need to have the book written and turned in by January 2018."
Hmm.
And I'm like, guys, that's 6 months from now. Like
Right.
the last Ironman of the year is in November. It's August 1st. Like, and they're like, well, do you want to do it or not? so, so I'm just saying, like, I didn't. It comes off as me like, and of course, like I try to be confident about this, and there's a little cockiness there, but this was
Hmm.
not my plan of like, oh, let me just show everyone like that I'm awesome and I'm gonna try this without like I kind of like got forced into this
Hmm.
in a way, like it just was not my initial plan to do
See, and
this.
that's what I kept reading through it, like going back to the beginning and trying to. I'm like, how did he get roped into this? Like, I kept trying to figure out, like, did you come up with it on your own? Were you just had like a fever dream all of a sudden, and you're like, I'm doing it. Like, I kept trying to figure out, and I'm not sure if it's in the book. Maybe I missed it. I
No,
don't
I
know.
don't. I don't talk about why.
Yeah, I
I
was like, I don't
just
think you talk about why you ended up in this predicament of having 3.5 months to train. That's the idiotic part
totally. Yeah.
for you listening, um, of getting ready for an Ironman. Not necessarily doing it for your first, which is not, to me, very advisable, but also on top of that, having 3.5 months to do it. So,
Totally. Yeah. And so I just want you to feel better about that, because I feel like triathletes reading this might just immediately be like, okay, is this guy's trying to show us up or what is his goal
yeah.
here? And yeah, okay, like I'm a competitor, so it gets to that point a little bit where people are doubting me and I'm like, well, you know what? Screw you. But this was not my intention to come in and make a mockery of this or anything. Like I really, it's the way it worked out, man. And it
Yeah.
kind of made the story like, once I got over the initial shock and, fear of that, I was like, okay, you know what? This does kind of, because the one thing that you need more than anything to compete in these things is motivation,
Right.
and so the fact when someone tells you like, okay, like 100 days go, and you don't own a bike and you've never ran more than 8 miles in your life and you used to be a good swimmer when you were a kid, but now the most swimming you do is like snorkeling around, you're like,
Hmm.
okay, I'm motivated.
Yeah.
And when you have something on the line of like, okay, I have to write about this. So that was sort of the push into it, and that's why, you know, the book just starts out with a bang, like, all right, today's the day. I'm telling everybody, here we
Let
go.
everybody know.
You know?
See, I noticed even like I don't know when the turn was, but it was like even for the first month, you know, you start 100 some odd days out, and even for the first like 30 days, it seems like you're still just kind of meandering around, like not really
Yeah.
getting into training yet.
Totally. Yeah. There was like all this in my mind too. Like, well, maybe, you know, like I go to my doctor, I'm like, maybe he's going to say like, dude, don't do this, you know, or like
Get
maybe
you off
there's
the
going to be
hook.
something that's going to, you know, it's just, I kind of, for a while, I just like doing all the research. It was just hard to believe. It was so hard to believe I was going to do it that I just wasn't doing it, you know? And
Yeah.
then finally something clicks where it's like, all right, like, you can't read about training forever. You just have to start doing it, you know, and
Yeah.
like start somewhere. And I don't have all the gear yet, but how am I going to piece that together? And okay, like start where you know, start with what you have and start where you can and just let's go for it. So yeah, there was a bit of meandering, which cut down the time. And, you know, but again, that just even more built this pressure and this motivation and this drive. I don't know. I guess it just took me a while to get in that right headspace to be like, okay, now I feel like, because, you know, like training plans, like everybody has a million different opinions, right? So
Mhm.
I spent a while trying to figure out, well, like, okay, what should I do? Like, what's the expert
Yeah.
advice, quote unquote, on training 3 months out? And turns out there is none, because no expert would ever recommend that, right?
Right.
So sorting through it all and being like, okay, what should I do? What's the approach here? And then finally just being like, all right, man, like I just got to do something. So let's
Hmm.
get going. Yeah.
Did you end up writing your own schedule, or did BMAC help you, or how did the schedule come together?
Yeah, so I had the influence from characters like BMAC and Drew, who were like, "Hey, you know, these are kind of benchmark goals you want to get." But initially, yeah, eventually, I just started going with how I felt. You know, I had a lot
Hmm.
of IT band issues, as you've read about,
Yeah.
and my scheduling was a nightmare, as
Yeah.
it is for a lot of people who are doing this. And so, just to fit everything all in. But mostly, I just really tried to work on my mental aspect, and I
Hmm.
just figured, like, somewhere in my head, which is the dumbest thing to think when you're talking about these distances, but I'm just sort of like, what kept driving me was like, okay, you know, I'm not quite there yet, but you know what? It's one day, man. Like I can gear up for one day. You know, like when
Hmm.
I get to that starting line, like you know, like whatever it is, even if I haven't run 10 miles, like one day I can gut it out,
Just
which
pad it out.
obviously
Yeah.
is a stupid, foolish thing to think, right? So, but yeah, no, I mean, what you see is what you get, man. Like in the book, that's the timeline is true, the story is true. Like I was kind of winging it and just fitting in wherever I can and just reacting to my body,
Hmm.
and just trying to learn as I go and see like what is my capability, how fast can I push, and my body would push back. You know, I would feel injured or feel tired, and
Hmm.
um, you know, and just kind of navigating through that. As I'm sure, like I mean, all the best laid plans for your training, you're an expert, you have these, but I'm sure at times, right, you have like you're like, hey, I can't stick to this schedule because of XYZ or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe not. Yeah.
I've been through injury actually recently, and I have so I have a coach and he writes out my schedule, but I also have the ability to pull the plug at any given time if necessary. He trusts me enough, and I know myself well enough that if it's like this is not happening today, then I have that ability to say, okay, that's it for today. Let's make a smarter approach at this. Yeah.
Yeah, what surprised me was, I mean, this is like swimming, biking, and running, but it's like riddled with injuries. Like it's so easy to get hurt. Like I don't get that. Like
It's
that was something I
repetitive
was.
motion. It's the same motion over and over and over and over and over again. So that's why it suggested that you're an idiot for doing it in 3 months because your body needs time to make muscle stronger, to make ligaments and all those attachments stronger, and like not have your bones break down from repetitive, pounding to like bones and getting in stress fractures. And there's so many ways that your body can break through repetitive motion that's why when you try to cram something like that in so quickly, the risk for injury is so high.
Super high. I think it was like 70 some percent chance of
Yeah.
like of getting injured as a triathlete, which like blew me away. I would have never guessed that, you know, these seemingly basic things that we've done forever would you would have that. But it's like the intensity, I guess. And then really the mental breakdown that you experience, you know, and just how your world becomes so distorted. At least for me as an outsider, I mean, there's one example in the book where I talk about, you know, like you can't go backwards, right? Like I remember going on like a 3 hour ride and then a 7 mile run, and I'm all stoked. And a couple days later, I do a 2 hour ride and a 5 mile run. It's like, dude, that's a huge workout, right? But after that workout, I'm like, man, I slacked off. You know,
Yeah.
I'm like, what?
Your
Like,
new normal is raised. It's
yeah,
it's totally different perception.
yeah, and just like that headspace was baffling to me. And I don't like, how do you just go for a run after dinner anymore? Like, you do all these competitions, you do all these events, like
Well,
pushing
I mean,
yourself. Like, are you satisfied with like, hey, I'm gonna go on a 30-minute run before dinner? I mean, you gotta. It's like nothing for you. Like, does
right?
that
Yeah, it's
satisfy you?
definitely tough now. As I was telling you, and anybody who's watched the podcast knows this. I spent 8 years trying to become a professional triathlete. So yeah, I've backed off this last year, and I really felt kind of aimless. Like I don't even know what I'm doing. And I actually kind of think, you talk to some of the people that founded Ironman, or really kind of did the very first one, and then you yourself kind of had this kind of almost laissez-faire attitude about being active. And I've kind of found a challenge like that. Next Friday, I'm flying out to Colorado Springs to run the incline. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Like, speak.
No, it's so the Manitou Springs incline. So it's 9/10 of a mile, and it goes up 2,000 feet in that period of time. So the average grade is about 40%. So I'm just like trying to find a new challenge. Going to go see how it goes. Yeah. So it's like once you've done it, and I raced halves. I haven't done a full. I haven't had the interest in doing the full because I obliterate myself on the halves. But yeah, coming back down, it's like, okay, well, on Sunday I used to ride 80 miles and then go for a half-hour run after that. Well, now I only do 2.5, 3 hours and run 20 minutes. And it's like, I'm not doing as much anymore. I'm not doing that much. Yeah, I definitely feel that all the time.
That was like a mental trap. I just felt like, oh my God, like I'm gonna totally lose touch of my normal life. Like, even like when I would go on hikes with friends, I really
Yeah,
tried to maintain a lifestyle, and I'd be like just on the hike, it's beautiful Hawaii hike, and I'm like, man, I'm just wasting my time out here. Like, this is not benefiting me. You have this monkey on your back that you're just like, man, 2 months or 1 month from now, I got to be ready to do this. And literally anything that doesn't contribute to your training is like seem as a distraction or something
right.
standing in your way. And I just, that was really hard for me. That was like, I think one of the hardest parts of it, of just sort of recognizing the sacrifice you have to make, and then sort of humorously sort of discovering that a lot of people who are into this stuff, date other triathletes, or this is their social calendar, or as
Yeah,
I jabbed, like the anti-social calendar, like
right.
this is like, this is what they're committed to doing, and that's so admirable. I just don't know if that was the hardest part for me. That really
Yeah.
was, like, integrating in that way to that intensity, and just having to sort of eliminate everything else in your life when you have these races coming up.
hmm Do you feel like you like in the beginning of the book? Yeah, there's definitely like a lot of derision. I remember um, I saw his therapist as I was reading through your book, and I was like, man, I hate this guy. I was only about halfway through the book because you definitely had that like naive, like whatever, like I don't like you, I can do this attitude. Although reflecting on myself, if I was in your position, I'd probably feel the same way, where it's like having this negative attitude about, well, I can't do this, but I'm gonna do it. Like, it doesn't help you. Even if it's like a crazy impossible challenge and maybe you're not gonna make it, but trying to buy into these people saying, okay, like you talk about Mr. I'm on another level.
Oh yeah.
Um, you know, you can't buy into that attitude of you're not good enough, you're not going to be able to make it. So kind of like transformed through it, but
Yeah, I mean, if I were to listen to all these people, like, there were so many people being negative enough, right?
yeah,
That if I was going to submit to that and be like, okay, you guys are right, then why try, right?
right.
So at some point I realized, okay, I'm on a tight physical timeline,
Mm-hmm.
but mentally I think I can get where I need to be. And, of course, like I say, I'm a competitor. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, you're going to give me hell, I'm going to give it right back to you. Like, not going to let you push me down and tell me I'm not good enough. Like, that's going to motivate me even more. And
yeah.
I think that's just kind of like a life attitude. I mean, for me, but for a lot of people, it's
Mm-hmm.
like when you meet resistance, like, how do you respond to that? Are you going
Yeah.
to push back? And if you're doing triathlons, you better push back, because even when you're in top physical condition, you're going to be hitting walls, of some degree.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to learn to get through that. So I just realized that, okay, there's no way I'm going to get to where I should be physically, but what I can do is just be like 100% confident mentally. And yeah,
Mhm.
that I get that breeds cockiness in a way.
Yeah.
And to be fair, I'm humbled at times for sure. But I just didn't want anybody else telling me, oh, don't, because then it's just, okay, why do it? If I'm not going to
Right.
believe in myself, and I mean, even my own family was like, "You're crazy." My
Yeah.
sister's a big marathon runner, and she was like, "You're gonna die." I'm like, "Okay, well, we'll see about that." So yeah, it's just you have to get to the mentality, and I don't know, maybe you can shed light to me. I just assume that's where everybody gets to because at some point, like there's you're training, but there's always going to be somewhere where you're not quite ready. So it's like, are you really going to have that doubt in your head, or like you can't have that doubt when you get the starting line, can you? You have to wipe it out. What choice do you have?
Yeah, I mean, you have to try your best. Everybody has their own demons to deal with. Some people are afraid of succeeding. Some people are afraid of failing. Some people are afraid of this or that, like all kinds of different things that people are afraid of. And we all deal with them differently. Like sports psychology is an entire field of performance enhancement that's like developing and becoming a new thing and trying to deal with all the weird little quirks that everybody has. Um, I did as I went on through the book, I kind of came to the perspective thinking about you prior to having kind of met you digitally here. You made me think about this friend I have who's not a particularly great runner. I ran with him in high school and cross country team, and it made me think about if he came to me because he sometimes comes up with overly ambitious plans. I think I would have said to him, okay, his name's Daniel. I would have said, okay, Daniel, you're an idiot. But if you're gonna do this, like let's figure out how the best how best to do it. If you're determined to do it, let's put together the best plan we can.
Totally. Well, that's basically what everyone told me. They're like, "You're
Yeah,
an idiot, but okay, like I'll help you if you're going to try and do this."
yeah,
I mean, everybody from BMAC to even Gordon Haller was kind of like, "Wow, that's and he's the guy that he didn't really train for his. He was just
yeah,
like he did these things, right?" So I think he was kind of shocked. He wasn't shocked that I didn't have a plan because he would never have a plan, but he was shocked that I, had just never done anything in this
right.
regard. Um, so do you feel that you're like one thing I realized is that because of this way you're pushing your limits and everything like that, and you're constantly having to up your game, that a lot of people describe like an addiction in a way to this
Mhm.
physical activity. Do you find that you're in that space where like the more you do, the more you want to do, and like do you feel addicted to triathlons?
I don't know about triathlons in particular, but I am addicted to. I'll say addicted. We can debate about the semantics of that word later,
Fair.
but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, the idea of being successful and in I channel that through athletics a lot where like I ran on a scholarship in college, but I'm not good enough to be a professional runner. Like I was like I could run sub 16 for the 5K, so pretty quick, but like you're gonna be a professional runner,
That's pretty quick.
you're gonna be in the 13s to be a professional runner. So like not even close. And it gets, astronomically harder, logarithmically harder as you go up in that scale. So for me, it was a personal challenge, but also I do another show called Runner's High on, I just talk about long distance running and that kind of stuff. And I'm big on this like rate of perceived exertion for training. Not so big on like, let's only focus on pace or a lot of it revolves around kind of chasing this feeling where you are almost in this zen-like state where your mind is kind of fallen away and you kind of become pure motion. So in a lot of ways, I'm chasing that, and that's the addiction. Is like you have to put yourself through enough pain and suffering and enjoy the vast majority of it to try to find this place where you're going hard and the pain is there, but it's not bothersome. You're simply noticing it. It's a state of meditation almost. So I'm kind of after that.
Okay, you're after the pain and suffering. Yeah.
Well, no, I mean I talked to a lot of triathletes. A lot of triathletes better than me. Funny enough, I talked to Adam Fye, who's a pro triathlete. Last week, his episodes are coming out as we speak this week, and like he does Ironman, and he did two Ironmans 3 weeks apart, and didn't originally plan on doing that. but he wasn't after the suffering. He was after the challenge, and he's trying to get better and make his way to Kona. But like, I don't know that I've between pro triathletes, amateur triathletes, ultra marathoners, I don't know that anybody is after the suffering, but they are okay with dealing with the suffering to find the thing that they are after, which is usually a sense of accomplishment or that high or something that comes as a result of the suffering.
Totally. No, that makes total sense. I kind of found that as well. People, when they say that they like the challenge of an Ironman, what I think they mean is that they like having completed that challenge.
Right.
It's and for me, I got to be honest. I mean, I worked out in those 3 months more than I ever have in my life. I mean, I'm a generally active guy, but in terms of intensity, and dude, those were some nice nights on the couch, man. I'll tell you, like, you feel good. You're like,
Yeah.
man, I just worked out for like 4 hours and I went hard, and now I'm feeling good and complete, and you feel like you've earned whatever you do. Like for me, like having a beer, or like I was like crushing 2 baked potatoes and a big chicken breast. I just like you just feel like, wow, like I did something, and
Yeah.
that, I respect that. That is a feeling that's, that a lot of people don't get, and that it's harder to get in our modern world where everything you do now like doesn't require much effort. So that
Yeah.
was a cool feeling. And, when you have those off days, like you really feel accomplished and you feel like, wow, okay, I'm doing it. So I appreciated that. Yeah, that was cool.